morning, everyone. I'm Jill Bushbacher. I'm the business liaison for the City of Tempe Economic Development Department, and we're pleased to have you with us this morning. Some of you have been quite involved in this area and have businesses or own property or live nearby and have taken a lot of interest over the last couple of years as we've created the vision for the area. And others may be new to the area or to this project and plan that we're going to be discussing, but we really appreciate you all being here and spending time with us today. Just want to talk a moment quickly about how we got here. We're doing a discussion today about the infrastructure master plan. We've been talking about this area at the city and with the community for a couple of years now. And, based on some of your input as part of how we got here today to determine that we were going to do such a plan. And I just want to mention a couple of things that have happened also since our last public meetings about this area. The city took two actions this last October relating to this area, the Smith Innovation Hub. And one of them was adopting a general plan amendment, which allows for a wider variety of uses in the area, including residential for the northern portion of it, and our consultants with HDR will get into the details of that a little bit more in their discussion, but I want to mention that. And another action that was taken was that the city approved Smith development guidelines for the area. So those are two things that have happened since we last met. We're still very focused on this area. From an economic development standpoint, we know that it's a very important area. It's surrounded by a lot of new development. There's a lot of neat things going on in it already, and some projects that will be coming out of the ground here in the next several months. And it's just, again, an area of focus for us in the designated pilot area for our innovation hub strategy for economic development. Just want to thank everyone for working together in the community, and thank you all for being here today. And I hope you'll share your input along the way or after the presentation today, I should say, and also with the survey that will be coming up that we'll be discussing with you as well. So some of the things you're going to be talking about today will be some of the things, again, that you mentioned in the previous meetings, like missing sidewalks and drainage and lighting. And again, we just want you to know that we heard you and we're trying to respond and take some action here that will, lead to some improvements in the area that will help everyone. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to our colleague at HDR, Christy Shepard, and then she'll turn it over to Michael LaBianca with HDR. They're the firm that we've hired to help us with this study.
Thank you, Jill. Participants joining us via their computers on WebEx or through their phones are currently muted. I'll describe the meeting format and how to participate in just a moment. But first, if you're having any technical issues right now, you may need to hang up or log off and then redial or reconnect. If that does not work, please contact WebEx Help at 866-229-3239. Again, that number is 866-229-3239. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, great. So sorry about that. After the presentation, we'll describe and display instructions for asking a question or making a comment. Keep in mind that after this meeting, you can continue to ask questions or provide comments anytime through June 17th by visiting the study website at tempe.gov/SmithHub and take our survey. The format for today is a short presentation, then the remainder of the meeting will be open for comments and questions. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be posted to the project webpage. And with that, I will pass it over to Michael LaBianca.
Good morning, and thank you, Christy. My name is Michael LaBianca, and I'm a land use and transportation planner with HDR Engineering and the project manager for the Smith Innovation Hub Infrastructure Master Plan. For the ease of this presentation, I'm going to refer to the Smith Innovation Hub as the Smith. And I also just want to give you a heads up that I will be reading from a script. This will help to keep the presentation relatively brief, on point, and get to the Q&A session. So with that, I'll go ahead and begin. Christy, if you could advance, thank you. The Smith is a half-mile square area bounded on the north by Rio Salado Parkway, on the west by McClintock Drive, on the east by Price Road, in the State Route 101 loop, and on the south by University Drive. The purpose of the Smith Infrastructure Master Plan is to guide public infrastructure improvements in the area. The study will identify and prioritize infrastructure needs for both short, the next 5 years, and long-term, next 20 years timeframes, and serve as an implementation plan for identified projects. This will include planning level cost estimates for identified projects and will feed into the City of Tempe's Capital Improvement Program for eventual approval by Tempe City Council for design and construction. A lot of discussion of infrastructure these days. We're going to define it, and for the Smith, it's defined as streetscape, which includes roadway, lighting and sidewalks, shade, both trees and structures, pedestrian and transit amenities, such as bus shelters, stormwater drainage facilities, and water and wastewater systems. It also includes gateway features, art or branding elements, wayfinding, and open space. As Jill mentioned, in addition to undertaking this plan, some new actions have been taken by the city to promote the vision for the area, include adoption of a general plan amendment for the northern portion of the area shown on the map as hatched in gray above 5th Street, which divides the Smith east to west across its center. The general plan amendment allows a greater intensity and diversity of use in this area to allow both vertical and horizontal industrial mixed use in the area north of 5th Street, with mixed-use land uses along the Rio Salado Parkway. An example of the mixed-use land use is Tempe Station, a multifamily and retail development with hotel planned for the vacant parcel along Rio Salado between Perry Lane and Smith Road. In addition to the general plan amendment, the city approved the Smith Innovation Hub Development Guidelines. There are also a number of existing City of Tempe policy documents that provide guidance for the proposed improvements. Tempe recognizes the operation of many businesses in the Smith, both new and those that have been here for decades. Approximately 250 unique employers reside in the Smith, employing over 5,000 people. The majority of buildings in the Smith were originally built for industrial and manufacturing uses. The design features of these buildings are more consistent today with newer uses such as mixed-use commercial, office, and retail, as modern industrial manufacturing businesses typically require higher ceilings, wider and taller shipping bays, wider turning radii on site, and larger lots. As a result, the Smith is experiencing changes in the use of buildings, resulting in greater occupancy and changing uses. In addition, the Smith's location is also very important in determining the infrastructure needs for the greater area. This graphic highlights some of the surrounding land uses, such as Tempe Marketplace, the Rio 21 development, and the proposed Novus development, north of Rio Salado Parkway, west of McClintock Drive. Physical barriers that exist east and west of Smith include the APS substation to the west and State Route 101 loop to the east. The area immediately south of the Smith includes the Escalante and Alegre Parks communities. These neighborhoods are home to nearly 9,000 people. This population, largely multifamily residents, have higher shares of demographic groups that contribute to transit dependency when compared to the overall city. Zero-car households are nearly 1.5 times out of the city, and these factors contribute to a population that uses transit and bikes for commuting at 1.5 times the city's rate. Team member observations and traffic information collected as part of this study noted a number of people walking north-south through the Smith to access Tempe Marketplace and the Rio Salado multi-use park pathway. Many of the infrastructure needs of the Smith in response to changing land use rely on the actions of the private sector to implement as new development is proposed. This would include utility connections, improving sidewalks and landscaping, consistent with Tempe's development standards. Given that, we will focus the majority of today's discussion on transportation and streetscape elements described previously. This graphic provides a transportation overview and highlights some of the unique aspects and challenges that the Smith presents. If you're familiar with the area, you know that curb-to-curb widths can be wide, especially on Smith Road, where there is 48 feet of pavement for the 2 travel lanes. Many of the other streets are slightly narrower, with a typical pavement width of 40 feet. As a result, we are proposing alternatives that fit within the existing roadway width to minimize disruption that would occur to businesses and to accommodate the larger vehicles and trucks that businesses in the area rely on today. Smith Road, which runs north-south through the center of the Smith, is an existing transit route, Bus Route 62. The Tempe Transportation Plan also identifies Smith Road as a bike-it route, the reflector route, represented here as a blue dotted line. Bike-it routes are important bicycle routes to the community and are typically low car volume, low speed streets, and can include specialized bike treatments, including striping, green paint, landscape, and marked bike lanes. The reflector route is planned to extend from Tempe's southern boundary to the Rio Salado, with some segments completed and others currently in design. While parking today is observed on many streets in the Smith, the orange areas on this graphic show where parking is currently unauthorized. We surveyed businesses and property owners in the Smith as part of this planning exercise, and 43% of the respondents stated parking was either important or extremely important to their business. Today, there are limited sidewalks in the Smith. Smith Road is the only street with continuous sidewalk, with Perry Lane and 5th Street having segments of sidewalks. As new development occurs, property owners are installing sections of sidewalk. However, this has left significant gaps. In addition, many of the existing segments are out of date with American with Disabilities Act requirements. A couple of additional points from this figure before I move on. The hatched area on Perry Lane, south of Rio Salado Parkway, indicates the general area of street ponding, which occurs following significant rain events. This area also lacks curb and gutter, and that ponding impacts adjacent properties. The section of Perry Lane in this area shows that the existing right-of-way is also constrained to 30 feet. And finally, traffic volumes for the Smith show that traffic is relatively light, especially related to surrounding arterial streets. One interesting observation from the information collected is that the AM peak traffic in the Smith is later in the morning, approximately 11 a.m., and earlier in the afternoon, anytime between noon and 4, depending on the location, than the surrounding arterials, which typically have typical arterial street, early morning and late afternoon rush hour peaks. We will share many alternatives with you today and hope that following the presentation, you'll visit the project website at tempe.gov/SmithHub to take our alternative survey. The survey offers an opportunity to review this information at your leisure and respond with your comments and ideas. The following slides show alternatives being proposed for some of the streetscapes in the Smith. With the exception of the segment on Perry Lane North, proposed short-term improvements are all within the existing right-of-way. This slide shows a simple table of criteria assigned to each of the alternatives proposed. Level of comfort addresses bicycle and pedestrian comfort. Curb access relates to the ability to access the curb for parking, pickup and drop-off, and transit access. And mobility relates to business users and their ease of access to the curb. This graphic summarizes the streetscape improvements proposed for the short term, or 5 years, which are described in the following slides. The streetscape improvements proposed for the short term focus on north-south connectivity through the Smith, as those are the main routes where transit, bicycle, and pedestrian activity are today. These routes provide access to Tempe Marketplace and the Rio Salado to the north. Because of the physical barriers to the east and west, and the arterial east-west routes bordering the Smith, a majority of through movements are north-south. Cut-through traffic has been noted as a concern among Smith property and business owners. As congestion increases on Tempe arterial streets, the problem of cut-through traffic is likely to increase over time. Smith's wide, unstriped streets invite higher travel speeds. narrowing the travel lanes by striping the roadway to accommodate parking and bicycle lanes, and incorporating occasional curb bulb outs to accommodate shade trees are techniques that can slow traffic while providing other benefits and improving the appearance of the street. All of the improvements on Perry Lane would address sidewalk gaps and improve sidewalks and intersections for ADA compliance. North of 5th Street, improvements would address the lack of curb and gutter and drainage. Alternative A on Perry Lane, north of 5th Street, includes parking on both sides of the street, curb and gutter, and sidewalk at the back of curb. Note that lighting is shown on all alternatives as lighting is proposed in the short term on these routes, addressed with the later slide. Alternative B introduces sidewalks detached from the curb to accommodate a landscape strip with street trees and the ability to incorporate low-impact development. Low-impact development is a sustainable approach to stormwater management that utilizes the landscape to absorb stormwater runoff, reducing off-site flows that can contribute to stormwater ponding and increased infrastructure costs. On Perry Lane, north of 5th Street, low-impact development would introduce curb cuts and curb extensions that would replace some on-street parking with landscape areas that would use low-impact development techniques to manage some of the stormwater. This slide shows an example of LID, or low-impact development, on College Avenue. This Tempe LID example accommodates street drainage and contributes to sidewalk shade and the appearance and comfort of the street for pedestrians and bicyclists. For Perry Lane south of 5th Street, proposed improvements include the addition of on-street parking, street striping and lighting, and improvements to sidewalks at intersections with 5th Street for ADA compliance. Improvements proposed for 5th Street between Perry Lane and Smith Road would address sidewalk gaps to accommodate on-street parking to varying degrees as shown on the alternatives. Alternative A would replace the existing sections of back of curb sidewalk with a detached sidewalk, allowing occasional curb bulb outs to incorporate street trees and additional LID, or low impact development. LID techniques here would improve the streetscape appearance and help offset the stormwater ponding on Perry Lane, as some of the rainwater runoff in Smith is originating from areas to the east and south. LID on 5th Street would help mitigate the flow and flood and stormwater ponding that occurs on Perry Lane. Alternative B would complete the gaps of sidewalks at back of curb and introduce parking along the entire segment. Today, Smith Road operates with a center two-way left turn lane for its entire length. Two alternatives are proposed for Smith Road, both of which would make ADA sidewalk improvements, introduce marked bicycle lanes as part of the Bike It Reflector route, and improve bus stops with shelters and benches. Alternative A maintains a two-way left turn lane and replaces the area of parking with marked bike lanes. The bike lanes would consist of a standard 6-foot bike lane separated from traffic by a 2-foot buffer. Alternative B eliminates the two-way left turn lane and preserves parking on the east side of Smith Road. Elimination of the two-way left turn lane would impact traffic flow, as cars making lefts off of Smith Road would have to wait for brakes and traffic to access driveways along the road. It is anticipated that traffic volume on the Smith Road would accommodate this without resulting in significant congestion. This slide presents a summary of the proposed improvements in the short term. I'll take this moment to remind you that all of the alternatives are presented in the alternative survey, which will allow you to review the alternatives at your own pace and provide comments. Improved lighting in the Smith has been requested by business and property owners. A lighting assessment was performed applying Tempe lighting standards to come up with a lighting plan for the short term. This slide identifies new lights, shown as yellow symbols, which would bring the network of Smith Road, 5th Street, and Perry Lane up to city standards. Proposed long-term improvements for the Smith would bring lighting on all of the Smith streets up to city standards. The Tempe Water and Wastewater Master Plan identified overall system needs through the 2040 planning horizon based on Tempe's general plan. The general plan amendment passed in October changed the land uses to allow greater density in the Smith, which could result in increased water and wastewater demand beyond what was projected at the time of the Water and Wastewater Master Plan. The infrastructure plan is evaluating the difference and the resulting impacts to the system to make recommendations. This slide shows a proposed truck route map. Traffic counts collected as part of the study show a large percentage of the relatively low volume of traffic in the Smith is large trucks. This is an indicator of the vitality of the Smith today, and it is anticipated that this will continue to be the case over time. We have to work with this as a necessary and vital element of the Smith. One approach to managing the truck traffic in the Smith is to work with the businesses to direct truck traffic to identified routes. This doesn't limit truck circulation in the Smith, but the guidance would be to ask that businesses direct deliveries and shipments to the nearest available route to access and exit the Smith. Through voluntary participation, the city can work with businesses to mitigate the impact of truck traffic on the Smith as the activity in the Smith and surrounding area increases. Additional short-term projects identified include projects previously noted in the transportation plan. These include bicycle lane improvements at McClintock and Rio Salado Parkway and McClintock and University Drive, sidewalk improvements on the east side of McClintock Drive, and Smith Road transit shelters. Change is already happening in the Smith with adaptive reuse of buildings and more intense development. Proposals such as Tempe Station, a large mixed-use development plan for the Rio Salado Parkway between Smith and Perry, will introduce residents, visitors, and more retail development to the Smith. Long-term improvements in the Smith will be implemented through the City of Tempe Capital Investment Plan projects as opportunities arise and as part of the redevelopment and zoning. In the long term, Perry Lane south of 5th could have sidewalks detached from curb and incorporate additional street landscaping to match the segment proposed north of 5th Street. 3rd Street would be improved to accommodate pedestrian sidewalks and landscaping. In addition, some parking could be replaced with these future improvements to accommodate curb bulb outs for increased landscape and street trees for shade. Over time, as the Smith develops and new uses introduce more commercial and retail uses, 5th Street will become increasingly important as an east-west connection through the Smith. 5th Street from Smith Road to Price Road could be improved with sidewalks and landscape areas. In the future, Rockford and River Drives can provide another north-south route with detached sidewalks and shade trees, with areas of curb bulb outs to control speeding and allow for increased landscape trees. North of Rockford Drive, Rio 2100 provides a connection to the multi-use path along the Rio Salado. Over time, it is imagined that Smith would take on a more urban composition as development intensifies in the northern half as a result of the adopted general plan amendment land uses. When development occurs in this area, consideration could be made for providing improved bicycle and pedestrian connections through what are today quarter-mile long blocks. Such long blocks discourage more urban mixed-use developments envisioned for the Smith. The connections are shown on this graphic as dotted lines and represent a conceptual depiction of this idea. In addition, proposed sidewalks are shown as green lines addressing the remaining gaps in the pedestrian network throughout the Smith. Another long-term project would be the introduction of lighting throughout the area to meet City of Tempe standards, as noted previously. The Innovate Tempe City Council presentation showed gateways identified for the Smith. They include Smith Road at Rio Salado Parkway and University Drive, with additional gateways at Rockford and River Drives. Gateway features may include artwork, branding, and other unique features that help to identify the unique environment of the Smith. We invite everyone to participate in the alternative survey, which is posted at the City of Tempe's website at tempe.gov/SmithHub. Next steps for the project will be to consider the alternatives with the feedback we received through today's meeting and the alternative survey. The team will develop preliminary cost estimates for the recommended projects. This information would be presented at a follow-up public meeting tentatively planned for July 16th. We hope you'll take the time to complete the survey and provide your thoughts on the infrastructure master plan. With that, we'll conclude the presentation, and I'll pass it over to Christy to talk about how we'll conduct the question and answer portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. To verbally make a statement or ask a question, we ask that you please virtually raise your hand. Here's how to do that. For those of you using WebEx through your internet browser, mobile phone app, or your WebEx desktop app, simply follow the instructions on the screen. If you would like to ask your question or make a statement, you can click the raised hand icon. When you are called, the moderator, which is myself, will unmute your mic and allow you to speak. When you are finished, the moderator will mute your line, and we ask that you lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again. Again, for those joining us online, all of these WebEx instructions are showing on your screen. If you are joining by phone as a call-in participant, press *3 if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. This gives us a raised hand signal. When it's your turn to speak, we'll call on your line and you will be unmuted. When you finish speaking, press *3 again to remove the raised hand signal. If you have joined using one of the WebEx applications, you may also choose to submit your question or comment in writing by using the WebEx Q&A feature. These instructions are displayed on the screen. Remember, if you are joining by phone, please press *3 if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. This gives us a raised hand signal, and when it's your turn to speak, we'll call on you and your line will be unmuted. When you finish speaking, please press *3 again to remove the raised hand signal. And a reminder, if you're having any technical issues, please contact WebEx Help at 866-229-3239. We will do our best to respond to questions in the order that they are received. Please be patient as we may have many questions. If needed, we can extend our meeting time up to 10 minutes to respond to any questions. If we still have outstanding questions at that time, we will respond to written questions as a part of the meeting summary and provide it to participants via our project webpage at tempe.gov/smithhub. For those on the phone, you may submit questions or comments by phone or other methods following the meeting. At this time, we will now begin answering questions. And Jill, I do see a couple of questions coming through the Q&A box. Give me just one moment. So the first question that we have is from Max Rudolph. Are there any plans for street improvement along Rio Salado, such as a bike lane or landscaping changes?
Thanks for your question. I think I would refer that to either Robert Yabez or Kathy Hollow with our Engineering and Transportation Department.
Okay, I can start. Sorry about that. So Rio Salado has bike lanes, I believe, in this section. So we have those up there. The other improvement that city's looking at in this area is a long-term improvement to possibly extend the streetcar this far to the east. So that's something that is long-term planning and we're considering right now. But otherwise, Rio Salado will be a 4-lane arterial with the raised medians and the bike lanes that are there today. Robert, did you have anything else that's going on?
No, that's what the extent of it at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you both. We do have another question in the Q&A box, Jill. This is from Marcus Newton. Perry Lane north of 5th Street should be a priority. It is a dangerous situation with flooding at 5th and no sidewalks. Additionally, no real lights. There are pedestrians walking in the middle of the street with no lights. It is extremely dangerous. The only real grocery store is Target, and you have all of those apartments that are right down the street from Perry Street to Target. Optimistically, what kind of timing do you see?
Thanks for being here, Marcus, and thanks for those comments. I know we've talked about this in the past with you as well, and it is certainly an issue that we're concerned about. As far as the timing goes, This plan will set up priorities for the city and private development to look at contributing to for this area. And we will begin to request funding through the capital improvement project budget in future years. So some of this will take some time, and some things can be done more quickly than others. The other question I would ask, I guess, of either Marilyn or Robert is, in the CIP budget, I know there's some lighting slated already for that particular area. Would either of you want to talk about the timing of that per the current CIP budget?
Hi, Jill. This is Marilyn.
Thank you.
For folks on the call, I'm Marilyn Drosa. I'm the Director of Engineering and Transportation for the City of Tempe. And the capital program does include an item for street lighting. And the street lighting the location of the street lighting will really depend on what is prioritized out of this study. So once we get to a conclusion, once the study is completed and all of the infrastructure needs are identified and they're prioritized, then we'll make a decision about where to invest those funds. Now, the input from the public is a super important piece of that. So if there are locations in this area that are of concern to the residents or the users of the area, make sure that you provide those comments to the team, and those comments will be part of the criteria that we use to determine where the infrastructure investment will be made. So I don't know if that answers the question. If Jill, do you feel like that answers the question, or is there something else you'd like to know?
That's helpful. Thank you very much, Marilyn.
Thank you both. So we do have a hand raised from Mark Davis. Mark Davis, we're going to unmute your line, and you should be able to ask your question live.
All right. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Perfect.
You are good to go.
Good. Thank you. We have a 3-year-old here with me, so apologize if there's chatter in the background. But question I have was really tied to the time frame that's being discussed and the time frame that that is kind of part of the definition that I'm understanding from this perspective. I hear people. I've heard in the explanation that it's more of a shorter term time frame defined as 5 to 10 years. And I guess I understood that from that presentation that was tied to the concept of kind of making an initial investment where the critical spaces are, the critical kind of more focused areas are, and then the longer term investment happening with private development to fill in where the less critical locations are. I just want to get a little better understanding, a little more color from staff and understanding the perspective of the time frame, and also the perspective of the time frame in terms of development that's expected to happen in this corridor. You know, you talk about that initial map that showed the mixed use happening and you know, allowing the mixed use along the Rio Salado piece and dividing it south. So I would expect, you know, development to occur on the fringes and then maybe work its kind of way to the core over time, as well as a lot of, interim and incremental development happening in that process too. But I just want to get my mind around a little bit of that time frame. The time frame of these capital improvements, the time frame of short-term, long-term, and then also how that ties in with a possible time frame for the extension of that streetcar and the associated infrastructure improvements that are tied to that expansion. Thank you.
Hey, Jill, this is Marilyn again. Thank you for that question, Mark. That's a lot to unpack. With respect to development, so I guess I'll try to get to each piece, and I'll ask my colleagues to help. With respect to development, the expectation for when development will occur and at what rate, Jill's better suited to respond to that. And part of it, is if you build it, they will come. That one of the challenges with enticing development into the hub is the lack of infrastructure. So that's why Jill, that's part of why Jill has initiated this study. So Jill, before I talk about how the capital program works and the timeframes, is there anything you want to say about your expectations for development or interest in development in the hub?
Absolutely. Thank you, Marilyn. So as you all know, several projects have already come out of the ground in the last few years in the area. There's a lot of interest in the area. Our department continues to meet with potential investors and developers that are interested in making enhancements in this area. So, some things will be happening sooner rather than later. But it is, again, just to remind everyone, it is all privately held land. So the city does not own the land, and we're not doing RFPs on city land in this area, so we don't control those timeframes necessarily. But we're doing all that we can to garner interest and attract investment to the area because we see tremendous potential there, and there are many positive things going on there today, and there'll be some new projects coming online that I can't really talk about now, but that are exciting for the area in the months to come. So I'll say that. And then the other thing I'll say is that for this plan, the combination, as you mentioned, Mark, it is a combination of investment between privately held land and development and the city. So this part of what we're doing with this plan obviously is helping us identify and prioritize specific items that we can invest in and that we can ask private development to invest in as that becomes appropriate, project by project in the area. And then I guess I would just turn it back over. And so some of that will happen in the next few years, we really believe. And then some of these items will be over a much longer term. I know that may not be as specific as you'd like us to be, but I think that's the best answer I can give you right now, and know that it's a very important area of focus for us, and that there is a lot of interest, and there are some new projects that will be coming online that we'll be announcing in the next few months. So, and then I'll turn it over to Marilyn to talk about how this would roll out through the CIP process at the city, because this plan that was also requested by our CFO is a method to identify and prioritize those items and then be rolled up into the process that Marilyn will explain. And maybe that'll help make it a little bit more of a fuller picture, Mark, to get at your question. Marilyn, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Jill. So without spending too much time, we have our capital program. It takes a while for us to really to create the capital program. There's literally hundreds of projects competing for dollars, and we try to do a 5-year forecast. Actually, several of the operating departments have 10-year forecasts, but we only put together a 5-year program for publishing. Council will see it in 5-year increments, and the competition is stiff, and based on the goals that council has set and the priorities that they've set overall, the vision for the community. So their projects will move around in the CIP, but typically, for capital program timeframe, 5 years is soon. 5 years is a short-term plan, and I know it sounds like a long time, but just as an example, we're working at Clark Park, and we spent a year doing planning. We'll spend another year doing design, and then we'll roll into construction. So it wasn't it's not unusual for what we consider a near-term project to be in year 4 or 5 of the CIP. So that we have time to do our due diligence up front, which is, I imagine, I think you might be in the construction industry or in development, Mr. Davis, but all the utility conflicts and working with utilities and working with in rights of way, and there's just a lot of the kind of fatal flaws that a project sometimes runs into that we want to address up front. So I don't know if that helps. So some of these projects that Jill will recommend will end up in our longer term capital program, like a 10-year program, but you won't see them in the 5-year that we publish. So I don't know if that helps.
Yes, that does help. Thank you. And I guess that, when I'm looking at the different drawings that HDR put together, I'm trying to think, should I also be looking at, in terms of like 5 years from now, or should I be thinking 10 years from now in terms of these alternatives? And that's a little bit of the context I'm thinking about as well. And I think your answer helps me understand that this is really, you should be looking at it from more of a 5-year perspective.
Yeah, if I could say the recommendations that are coming from this study will then be prioritized, and you'll see some of them in 5 years. You'll see some of them in 10 years. You won't see all of them in 5 or 10 years. They'll be prioritized, and we'll work them through the capital program, and some of them you may never see as conditions or issues, as conditions or development in the hub occur. We might then end up making a modification to the plan. So it is a bit of a evolving. Planning is always an evolving an exercise in evolution. But you'll see some in 5, some in 10, some maybe in 15, or not at all. They'll be modified in some way. So I don't know if that helps. And then at the end of the study, there will be a prioritization. Jill, I'm assuming that your team will make some recommendations on what the highest priority infrastructure is based on whatever criteria you establish, public safety usually being one of the highest.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I guess the concept is that today's conditions we know are going to be changing in the future, as you see with the Market Station project bringing over 300 apartments into the north side of the hub, with possible future housing projects in down the road as well. This kind of opens up that concept. So I'm just trying to think, should I be looking at the streetscape improvements from the perspective of what works best for industrial parking needs or office parking needs versus future residential interest? And that's where I think that's where I think there's a little bit of a, do I think about it in today's lens, or maybe what the general plan wants it to look like in 10 years from now? And I suspect it's a little bit of the latter of what that future vision wants to look like.
I think, Jill, that this is probably best for you, but yeah, part of what it looks like depends on, honestly, probably depends on how we work with the development community. So yeah, the general plan is Robert will tell you, he's a planner. It's a guiding document, but then of course, I'm sure in your profession that there are times when there's a better idea, and the general document is flexible enough to allow for a change in a use or a change in in that overall vision. So I'll stop, Jill, so other folks can ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. We do have a question in the Q&A box from Anthony Spinato. As a property owner, are any of these improvements, such as sidewalks, going to be at the property owner's expense, or are all the updates funded by the City of Tempe?
Thank you, Anthony, for attending today and for your question. So this plan is a guide for the city to prioritize its investment, but it's also a guide as, you know, perhaps developers assemble certain parcels and redevelop certain areas over time, or make certain improvements to their existing properties. There's opportunity in some cases to ask them to contribute to it. But it won't be like an improvement district where every business is asked to, you know, financially contribute. If that's I think that might be kind of what you're getting at. That won't be the case. We're not suggesting something like that. We're really looking at, you know, development by development, and also definitely the city having a very heavy role in funding and implementing these prioritized infrastructure projects. So if you have another follow-up question to that, please let me know. I hope that answers what you were getting at.
Thank you, Jill. We do have a couple of questions from Gretchen Reinhardt, so I'll go over the first one and then we can go from there. Is Smith understood as a connection to the Rio Salado path, like Rockford was mentioned to be? It absolutely should be, as it is, the connector route currently from both the Alegre and Escalante neighborhood areas.
I think the short answer to that is yes, but I would defer to my colleagues in engineering and transportation, Marilyn or Robert or Kathy, any of you that would like to address that with your expertise.
Yeah, good morning, Kathy Hall here. I'm not sure there was a question there, but I think it was a comment, and I think that's the way that we're headed, is that Smith would be one of the bike connectors to get people from University into Marketplace. So I think, Gretchen, you're right on point with your comment. If I'm missing the question, please let me know.
Thanks, Kathy. The next question from Gretchen is, what improvements to pedestrian crossing lights do you see, particularly along Rio Salado and University? The existing light at Smith is not designed well for bicycles. Cross a lane of turning vehicles.
So I'll take that one as well. So we can look at, when you notice something like that, please let us know and we'll take a look at what's going on out there. We retime our signals. We try to retime all the signals by a corridor every 3 to 5 years. But we certainly can take a look at ones individually as problems are noted. So we don't have a plan right now, I don't think, to go through and make any changes, but if you let us know, we'll certainly take a look at it and see what we can do to help it. Yeah, hopefully that answers or helps with what you were looking for.
Thank you, Kathy. And one final question from Gretchen. The city does, however, own the Streetscape for transportation improvements, correct?
I'm having a hard time listening to the, can you repeat that, please?
Sure. The city does, however, own the Streetscape for transportation improvements, correct?
I can answer that. Gretchen, I think you're referring back to, and hi, Gretchen. I think you're referring back to the conversation about who would do the improvements. And there are times, and if that's correct, there are times when we work with the developer and the developer will provide improvements in the right-of-way as part of an agreement. And then those improvements are turned over to the city for maintenance, for ownership and maintenance. So yes, I think that if that's your question, that anything in the right-of-way, unless we have an agreement with someone else, anything in the right-of-way, the city is responsible for maintaining operating and maintaining. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Marilyn. I don't see any additional questions at this time. As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, you can either click the raised hand icon to share your question or comment verbally, and we can unmute your line, or you can go ahead and use that Q&A box or even the chat feature to submit your question in writing. I do see a hand raised again from Mark Davis. Mark Davis, I believe your line is unmuted, so you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it unmuted? Oh, good. All right. So I apologize. I have the 3-year-old with me too. So you hear a little noise in the background, but I started typing this up. So the initial survey that was conducted, maybe I missed this, but were the results shared? I remember, I think Michael LaBianca was saying that 43%. He mentioned something about 43% applying to on-street parking was a strong priority, I believe he said. But the other questions that were kind of built into there that I thought were really insightful. In fact, I remember reading that questionnaire and just thinking, putting it aside and then thinking about answers and then picking it back up again because it was a pretty good survey. So I'm curious how many people responded to it and what were some of the other results that helped develop some of this today.
Michael, did you or one of your team want to talk about the survey?
Yes, thank you, Jill. Again, this is Michael LaBianca. I'd be happy to talk about that and appreciate the comments on the survey. Just looking at it here, we had a total of 19 responses from organizations. Actually, 30. Actually, it varies by question, so I apologize. We had a total of 36, 59. So we had different responses to the different questions. It looks like we had as many as 77 respondents to one question, so we can provide the specific statistics as to the results of that survey. And just for others on the presentation, this survey was distributed to businesses and property owners within the Smith and asked questions such as parking, the types of amenities that they feel are lacking, and the types of amenities that draw them, their investment or business to the Smith. And so that information we drew from. We did ask specifically about parking, as Mark mentioned, and also asked for participants in the survey to respond where they felt that parking was necessary and critical. And so that information was all considered as we developed the alternatives for the study. I don't know that the plan was to post that on the project website. There is some business information in there, but I think with team members' assistance, we could redact any personal information and provide that information as part of the project webpage.
Yes, we can do that, Michael. Mark, we're glad to post that on the tempe.gov/Smith Hub page.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we did have another question come in from Jorge Garcia. Has the city considered widening South Price Road or making it more user-friendly and safe for the businesses located on this street?
I defer to Kathy or Robert for that particular question.
So sorry, let me start my video. I'll take a shot at this one, and Robert, you can jump in, but South Price Road is part of the Loop 101 freeway, so anything we did would be in conjunction with ADOT, and I know that ADOT is just finished a study on the frontage road, but it was mostly to do with how traffic operates at the ramp and the frontage road connection there, merge points. So I know ADOT was looking at it. From a capacity standpoint, I don't think we need any more lanes on the road. It's a tough one to slow down with the straight as it is, and the fact that it's right next to the freeway. So, but again, it's an ADOT facility that we'd have to work with them on.
Thank you, Kathy. I don't see any additional questions at this time. We do have just a couple more minutes before the meeting is ending. So if you do have any other questions, again, feel free to use that raise your hand icon or place anything in the chat or Q&A box. Jill, with that, I can pass it back over to you and we can at least wrap this up and then stick around for the last few minutes.
Thanks, Christy. And again, thanks everyone for attending today. Please find our contact information here. Ken Halloran, the project manager in our engineering and transportation department, and then my contact information from economic development. Please don't forget to go into tempe.gov/SmithHub and take the survey to let us know your specific input about the alternatives that were presented and any other comments that you'd like to make. The other documents that we've referred to that are related to this plan and to this area are also on that page. So notes from previous public meetings, the design guidelines, the general plan amendment, you can find links to all of those at that site as well. And then that'll also be the page where you get the details on how to join us for the next public meeting about this plan, which will likely be July 16th. We're still finalizing that date and time. But again, refer to this webpage, please, for that information.
Thank you, Joe. We actually had one final question come through. Can the city or ADOT do something to increase the safety on South Price Road? The mailman has been rear-ended on this street.
Assertive use. So if you could, I guess, forward exactly what the concern is and where it's located, we can take a look at it. Again, South Price Road is an ADOT facility that we would work with them to try and develop some kind of solution, but I need a little bit more information on what was happening where, and then we can take a look at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. And thank you everyone for joining us. And with that, that concludes our presentation.